right now of partners in Europe, 75% are male, and 89% of the people who have the power to deploy capital are male. And if we think about homophily, you're more likely to create a relationship or feel a sort of affiliation to someone who looks like you, sounds like you, had the same education. And with 20% of VCs having gone to a top business school, Stanford or Cambridge or, a top university, well, what chance has someone from, a lower socioeconomic status who's got a great idea, but seeing that flow of capital is far harder.
Hey everyone, this is Prashant and I'll be host for the VC 10X podcast. And today we have Eleanor Kaye with us. Eleanor is the managing director of the Newton Venture Program. Newton is a joint venture between LocalGlobeVC and London Business School. Their mission is to ensure the next generation of investors represents the world we live in. To do this, they provide executive education programs to help people from underrepresented backgrounds access and accelerate careers in VC. To date, over 3,000 people from over 48 different countries have been through their programs. In this episode, we talk about Eleanor's learnings from a stint at Palantir and the move to Newton Venture Program. What is Newton Venture Program? The current state of diversity in venture capital. Who can apply for the program? How is the program structured and what will be covered? What are the benefits of the program? And lots more. So without wasting any time, let's dive straight in. This episode is sponsored by my own podcasting agency called Podcast 10X, where I help VCs start and run their own podcast. While I was running VC 10X, this podcast that you're listening to right now, I asked my VC guests, why don't you start your own podcast? I mean, it's the best form of marketing for VCs. As they say, VC is a people play more than even a capital play. A podcast enables you to put your people at the front. Your portfolio founders, your partners, and co-investors. It's a great way to build a brand and win competitive deals. It activates all your marketing channels in a single shot, be it YouTube or blog post or newsletter or social media. Everything gets activated in a single shot. And I get the same response from all the VCs that it's a lot of work and we don't have the time for it. I said, all right, let me handle the work for you. From pre-recording, editing, publishing to making social media clips. All you have to do is show up on a call, hit record, do the recording using the well-researched outline we provide you with, and you're done. We handle everything else. You know what they said? All right, let's give it a shot. So if you are a VC and want to up your marketing and branding game, I'd love to work with you. And if you're thinking there are too many VC podcasts already, remember, there are way more VC firms out there. And if you're not standing out, you're losing out. So if you want to work with me on starting your podcast, go to podcast10x.com and book a call today. I'll add the link in the description and show notes below. Look forward to working with you. Hey, Eleanor, so good to have you on the VC 10X podcast today. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure having you on, and we're very excited to talk about all things Newton Venture Program. And to start things off, can you give us a brief about what's the program and how you're involved in it? So tell us more.
Yeah, sure. So I should probably just give you a brief intro to me because my background, I was not involved in venture capital at all. So I was lucky enough to work at Palantir Technologies previously during a period of hyper growth for about 6 years. I think that gives you a very close look to how a company can grow in the very early stages of getting a lot of capital in, influx of capital, and the chaos that ensues as a company is growing. And I think this was the sort of foray into, wow, what is making this company flourish? Like, how is it growing to such a stage? And it was certainly some of the hardest parts of my career, but also the best. And when I left Palantir, I was very much looking for something that was community based, but also something that I hadn't worked in before. I was in media, film, TV before I joined Palantir. And so this was a really different experience. And Newton was very new when I joined. It was created as a joint venture with LocalGlobeVC. They're now known as Phoenix Court Group, but Local Globe is a pre-seed Series A fund that and London Business School. So together they wanted to create a program that was going to address the lack of diversity in venture capital and provide structured, high quality training to people who either want to break into venture capital, understand the sort of complexities of venture capital, or if you're already in venture capital, take you to those next stages. And we were meant to launch our first program in 2020, but of course, COVID appeared and there was a huge pivot, as most businesses did, and we pulled what was going to be our first in-person program to online. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the programs in a minute, but what we found was this was not just a program, but we were building a movement, a sort of community of people who wanted to do venture better, who wanted to really learn and support each other as a cohort-based learning. And, 3.5 years later and 600 alumni later, we've got this supportive network of people who are co-investing, sharing deal flow, opening doors to events and opportunities. And we'll talk briefly a little bit about like why Newton exists and why it's trying to address the lack of diversity in venture capital in a minute. But that's where we are right now. We've got three different programs. And yeah, I can tell you a little bit about them in a minute.
Absolutely. Yeah. So two different aspects of your answer. First being about your own experience at Palantir, and then your move to Newton venture programs, which is again very interesting. So we'll try to go deeper into both, but first briefly, let's try to dig out at what stage did you join Palantir, because that's obviously a big success story now, and everyone wants the learnings from that journey. So at what stage did you join? What was the environment like at that stage? What were the key learnings? And at what stage did you exit, and for what reason?
Yeah, so I joined Palantir in 2014, sorry. And at that point, I was the 100th hire in Europe. We had quite a small office, and I remember my first week, it was like, you've got to fly to Paris. We need an office there. And I was focusing primarily on operations, working with, our real estate team, but there weren't any real sort of functions in Europe right now. It was sort of US and me, and I didn't spend much time at home, and I was welcoming 12 new hires a week at that point, all around Europe and Middle East, and I was flying to Abu Dhabi and Tel Aviv, and like it was a pretty hectic time. The culture was really cool. Like I remember when I joined, the number one was sort of don't be an asshole, and it was sort of like, look, we're all here working towards this same goal. Like, and it was my first foray in a really ingrained culture of working towards something really special together, and really, to me, working with some of the smartest people in tech was a massive draw. Like, my background's not data science or anything to do with sort of coding or anything, but working with these people who think in really strategic and different ways was absolutely fantastic. And you were consistently challenged on the way you were doing things. But I think my favorite part was the sort of GSD, get shit done mentality. Like, if something was broken, you didn't wait to fix it, you just got on with it. And it was brilliant. By the time I left, I'd been through a couple of different areas of the business and moved into business development at that point. And you could see a real shift in, we're working towards a direct listing, and you can't mess around anymore, and less freedom with cash, and sort of much more emphasis on, look, we're all working towards this goal, but we're also working towards profitability and it was sort of a real shift in dynamic, and it felt much more corporate when I left than the sort of startup free world when I joined. I know a lot of the OGs there that I worked with for many years have left also to do other things. And, I think it's a different company to when I joined, but I loved it. Like, I loved the experience. I got a lot out of it, but yeah, definitely a big shift in culture and feel. I don't think COVID helped, by the way, because when I left, it was 21, end of 21. And I think and that was actually a big part of why I left, because removing the people and the sort of office culture, uh, I realized like I wasn't being so fulfilled in my work anymore. I was less sort of focused on the whole office, and you become a sort of smaller fish in a big pond. And for me, having direct contact with people and feeling that impact, sort of instant impact, was getting harder and harder to get. So in the end, I decided to leave just after we direct listed, which, was a hard decision, but it's worked out for the best for me now. I love what I'm doing now.
Absolutely, that's quite a journey at Palantir. I'm sure tons of learnings, and absolutely, I agree with your point. The company actually changes its form as it scales and it reaches different stages, whether it is from a pre-seed C stage to going to a Series A or Series B stage. That's a different company altogether. And then after that, when you scale to Series D, E, if you get to that stage, right? That's again an altogether different company. And if you start going public, that's a much different company, right? So that's very interesting to learn. And now again, talking about the Newton Venture Program. Uh, when did you join this program? Was the program already in place when you joined, or were you also involved with creating these programs, and what should be the right structure for it, what should be the contents and things like that?
Yeah, so when I joined, there was a good idea about what it would look like and what areas of venture capital needed to be addressed. What I inherited 6 months, I joined as head of operations, and 6 months later was executive director. And we had a real shift in approach. After, I guess, with any product, once you run it a couple of times, you get immediate feedback and you iterate and you change. And one of our values at Newton is around putting our learners first. So if our learners are saying, we need this, well, we implement it. And so the Newton programs that our first ever cohort members went through don't look at all really like what we what we do now. And so I guess I've had a lot of impact in the way the company's run. We're a much larger team now. We are I guess for me also, the shift to being the face of the business has been quite a shift for me. Like I've always been behind the scenes, and all of a sudden I'm on podcasts and getting quoted in big articles that are getting shared globally, and I'm now sort of this LinkedIn voice as well, and that's been a real shift for me personally. But it also inherently has shown me the importance of speaking out against the lack of diversity in venture capital, and the importance of trying to address it with, proper plans and a goal. And if we look at the reasons why we're here, well, we did a survey earlier on this year asking people, what would you know, could you describe venture capital? Like, do you know what this is? And despite it powering, all these huge businesses in the world, only 9% of the UK, we did this a UK survey, could confidently describe what venture capital is. And and some places the UK just didn't even know what it was, let alone like North Wales. There were some places where not a single female could describe what venture capital was. So for us, we wanted
But
to. Sorry.
yeah, just to interrupt you there. So were these people who were somewhat familiar with the business world, familiar with the startup world, or were they like completely normal citizens of UK?
Normal citizens of the UK. So we
Okay,
knew what we were
but
starting with. Sorry.
in that case, they are not into the business field, not into the startup field, so they might not know about it because they have no connection to it in a way, right?
For
So
sure. For
yeah,
sure. But isn't that part of the issue is that we've got a whole country of people
right,
who are not aware of how these businesses that they use on a day-to-day basis
right,
are even funded or created. And it's a wider societal issue in the fact that education, but like that's what we're trying to address with providing access to education about venture capital
mm-hmm.
and ensuring that people who do want to understand it can. And
Right,
I think, in my personal life, my life growing up, like venture capital, despite working in a startup, a very successful startup for 6 years, didn't know where the money was coming from or really understand how that structure works or even how it's presented externally. And that's really down to education about this topic. And, you're right, like these are people potentially a farmer, and it's like, well, why do I need to know this? But it's still important. It's still important to understand how, like, I understand very little about farming if we flip it the other way, despite growing up in the countryside. Um, but I think having access to this education is really important.
yeah, I completely agree with that. Access to education is supremely important. So, when we are talking about diversity, are you talking about we want to increase awareness about venture capital and the people who want to know about venture capital should know about it? So, are you the medium for that, or are you the medium for increasing diversity in terms of increasing people of color, increasing women in venture capital, and things of that nature? Which
Yeah,
one of it?
so it's actually to do with both, I guess we could say. So I think we first have to look at the impact of having less diverse folks having the ability to deploy capital. So and again, I'm sorry to use UK figures, but it's not far off in the US either. 11% of GBP goes to women founders. 0.24% goes to black founders, and 0.02% go to black female founders. So if you look at the flow of capital and where it's going, despite the UK being a very diverse country, it's not flowing to the diverse founders, or as we like to say, overlooked and underrepresented. We like to put the emphasis on the person doing the overlooking and doing the underestimating. So right now, of partners in Europe, 75% are male, and 89% of the people who have the power to deploy capital are male. And if we think about homophily, you're more likely to create a relationship or feel a sort of affiliation to someone who looks like you, sounds like you, had the same education. And with 20% of VCs having gone to a top business school, Stanford or Cambridge or, a top university, well, what chance has someone from, a lower socioeconomic status who's got a great idea, but seeing that flow of capital is far harder. And so with Newton, we are trying to provide an opportunity to learn about venture capital in the first place. We have a free program which anyone can do, and you can just sign up online and take part in the programs. Or you can learn as part of a cohort. Some people prefer the structured way of learning in a group dynamic. And you can also learn in person if you've got investor experience already. And what we're trying to do is our three pillars is around learn, network, and access. We really focus on the education being top quality. The networking is a massive part of our in-person and online learning programs. and then the access. It doesn't stop there. It's like, well, how can we get people into events where they normally wouldn't be able to go, to conferences, to even knowing that they exist? So we're all about like access to information as well.
Right, totally. That's a very holistic approach to it. And talking about so you mentioned about three programs. So one is a free program, one is a cohort-based program, and one is an in-person program. So are the cohort-based program and in-person programs paid programs?
Yes, we wanted to build a sustainable business,
Mm-hmm.
and so the programs do have a fee associated with them. We think you get a lot out of the money because of not you don't only just get the learning, then you get the network, you get the alumni experience where we run careers weeks and continued like discounts on conferences and tools. But we also appreciate that people have financial barriers, and so we offer scholarships where possible. And that's down to our partners at Phoenix Court Works and HSBC Innovation Bank. And they provide us with funding that can support learners who potentially would not be able to access our programs without their support.
Right. Yeah, totally. That's a great initiative there. And talking about the program itself, how long is the program? How is it structured, and what are the contents of it? Give us those details as well.
So each three of our programs follow a similar structure. It just depends on the level of depth and technical knowledge that is needed to be applied. So we start right at the beginning with seeing a deal. How do you even source deals? Like looking at your network, like looking around at like who you're connected to, how can you access new and upcoming deals. Then we talk up to like picking the deals. So we talk around due diligence and meeting the founder and like looking at the team and looking at pitch decks. And obviously we're going into far more detail with the in-person program. And then we're talking about winning the deals. So that's like, well, what as a VC firm or as an investor can you bring to that founder? Because it's a two-way relationship. We can't just ignore that it's not just the founder picking, but the investor picking as well. And thinking about the legals, which is obviously very, very difficult. And then we also talk about valuations as well, and evaluating the business. And then we go on around follow-on financing and exits. And we go into the softer skills, negotiations. We give people an opportunity to negotiate a deal and understanding, you're not just out to win. You have to think about this as a 10-year relationship, that you both want the best outcomes for both. And so, thinking about that negotiation, and especially in our fellows program, which is in person, they will get feedback on how they come across doing a negotiation. And I had this myself, and it was a bit of a shocker because I didn't realize I was so expressive with my actions, and I'm doing it now. You're talking with my hands, but it gives a lot away, and it's sort of having someone help you with that softer skills and those sort of leadership skills is so powerful, and takes you to that next level. So so the online program, our fundamentals program, that's over 8 weeks. We work it around a busy lifestyle, so you can join online once a week on a Wednesday. We run them twice a year, and we ask you to do a bit of work in between, of course, do writing an investment memo, due diligence work, cap table exercises. And then our in-person programs over 6 months, and we have 3 modules in person in London, and those modules last 3 days each. But we do a lot of sort of global practitioner meetings, coaching, other learnings around networking. Like I said, like networking is so important. So those 2 programs are very different approaches, but we can apply similar ways of working to both, and especially putting a lot of emphasis on building strong connections and networks.
Absolutely, that's interesting to learn. And as you just said, it's collaborative program by London Business School and Phoenix Venture Capital, right? If I'm getting the name
Phoenix
right.
Court Group, yeah.
Okay. I have had Ash Arora from Local Globe when it was called Local Globe, so I remember that name. So yeah, So these two teams are collaborating, the LBS and Phoenix, right? Who is holding like the rights to the content and what should be there in the program? So who brings in what? Basically, that's my question.
It's a great question, and actually, it's
Yeah.
one that I've had to navigate as the executive director. So we
Right.
are a completely separate entity in the way we work. So all of our operations are completely separate, and I run the business like a portfolio company, and I report into the board on a quarterly basis. And on our board are two local Globe employees and two London Business School employees, and so we through that sort of reporting structure, we can then present either new products, new ideas, and get that feedback on any senior hires. So it works very sort of similarly, but maybe slightly more control on the board, I'd say. A little bit more, they're very invested in how the success of the business. So from Local Globe, we have obviously the support of the whole Phoenix Court Group team. They help with designing content, and well, they did used to. We've now got a head of product who's taken that on now, and he's fantastic. And then London Business School, they've been running executive educational programs for years. What better place to learn about how to get the most out of your programs? And so we ask them for support and advice, but we also get faculty from there to teach. We love our VC practitioners, but not everyone's a teacher. So how do we combine the best of both worlds? Well, that's what Newton does, brings in the top decile faculty from London Business School and other business schools. We've had Imperial come in, Oxford Said, and Etihad. So, we're not just bringing in London Business School folks, and then we bring VC practitioners from around the whole ecosystem. We've had Andreessen Horowitz, we've had Bessemer, we've had Excel Index, like having those top decile speakers come in and teach to our students is just fantastic. And my biggest learning is probably that you can teach the theory, and that's what our faculty do so well, but it's not until you are faced with real life insights and learnings from practitioners that you can really gain sort of a real understanding of what it's like to work as an investor.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very important. And talking about the credibility of the program, because when it comes to these education programs, that becomes an important factor as well. That how much value will this program hold on paper, at least for me. The learnings are going to be great, I'm sure. Uh, but what's going to be the value of the credential? Because there are multiple colleges, top colleges, also offering venture capital programs. I think much of them are in person. I'm not sure how many are offering remote online programs, but I know a few that are offering in person programs. I know Harvard Business School is offering one, and there are multiple fellowships as well that do give you a certificate. That uh, that credibility that okay, you've done some program. And they do it for free. They have got someone to fund it, right? So that's also a program. So how do candidates who are looking for a good program that also has good credibility look at Newton, and how does it stand in comparison to all those other programs?
You know what? We're still very early on, even 3 years later. But what I have seen is that I think it's something like 85 to 90% of our applicants have been referred or have seen someone else do it and have thought, you know what, that sounds great. So we are building a very, very strong reputation for delivering high quality programs. And right now we're not struggling for applicants. We have always filled our cohorts, and that's down to people saying, you know what, I got a lot out of this program. And we're seeing a lot of CVC firms, LPs, founders, groups sending people to our programs to be using their training and development budget, because they know that the reputation is there, and so they know they're going to get good outcomes. And I think what we do is we use blind hiring, which is something that not everyone can get on board with. But we are adamant that removing bias from our application process will yield good diverse outcomes, and that is the case. Both of our last fundamentals and fellowship, and in fact I think our foundations program as well, is 50-50 identify male or female, and I think, or around that, because obviously we've got people identifying as non-binary, but like, there's a real, the pipeline is not the problem of like diverse folks in the ecosystem. It's just getting them in and up. So I think if people are looking for a program that you're going to sort of be committed to a community afterwards, then I think that's why Newton really works, because it's not just, I'm going to do this program together and we'll go through this journey together, but I'm going to come out of it with a supportive network, access to a whole global network of people who are all trying to work together and share success. And I think that's where Newton really excels above other programs. And I think it's our independence from London Business School or another business school or from a VC firm that allows us to be a little bit more creative in the way we approach our learning. It's not a set executive educational program. I don't know if you've done any, but like, we're able to sort of bend the rules and do things a bit differently. And it's a bit more alive, I think, with what it's like to work in venture capital, and we can address that, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Can you give us some examples of things that you try to do differently and creatively at Newton?
Yeah, sure. So I think I mentioned around this networking aspect of things, and I think you can just let things happen organically when it comes to getting a group of people together. But not everyone is an extrovert. So we have built in not only a lot of networking opportunities, whether it's project work, whether it's like coffee chats, but we also actually teach people how to network in a way that's building quality over quantity. And that's been extremely valuable because, as someone who's sort of seen as a super connector now, having someone reach out to me and respect my time for a connection is great. Like, having someone to say, hey, I've written you this forwardable email, and I'd really appreciate your time if you don't mind like connecting me with this person. Here's the 3 things I need to get out of it. Just quality over, hey, do you know this person? Can you connect us? Like, it just takes you to that extra level. And I've got to credit Erica Young, who's ex Atomico and Anthemis, who teaches on our program, for bringing that sort of real quality to networking over just, oh, you'll meet everyone and it'll all just happen. Well, hang on, how can we give people a leg up? How can we open up people who potentially are a little bit more introverted to take that next step with networking, so that everyone has equal opportunity to thrive?
Absolutely. So do you also teach the skill of emailing and getting warm intros? You also teach that in the program?
Yeah, I think some of that's explicitly sort of under the tone, but it's sort of like, look, here's the theory behind it. Here's the theory behind like quality networking, or even looking at your own network. If you think about where you're getting information from, is that diverse? Is that really like representative of the world we live in? Well, if it isn't, then you're going to be living in this bubble. And I think as someone who was very shocked by the EU, like by us in the UK voting to leave the EU, I realized how much I was living in a London bubble at that point. And, I was obviously so unaware of what was going on outside of London. And so I really made a dramatic effort to, expand my news input, and even if I didn't agree with things, just being aware what was being said, so that my knowledge and understanding of information being given was from a far more diverse network. And those are the kind of things we're getting people to think about, and that will lead to more diverse deal flow, more connections, more quality connections, and that's what we're trying to sort of bring to the room.
Absolutely. That's great to learn. And talking about once a learner is done with the program, right? The program is completed for him or her, then what can they expect? What's the end outcome for them? What do they get at that point?
Yes, so I think I sort of alluded to it, but people, they will join our alumni network, which is where we continue to share resources, job opportunities. We have firms reach out to us to say, hey, we've got this job, we'd love to expand it to your network, and those kind of opportunities come our way, which is great. We run a careers week annually. We run mentoring programs. We have opportunities to take part in as speakers and panelists. We talk about building your brand. There's lots of learning opportunities, and we run a monthly life-wide learning session. So, for example, tomorrow we're running a deep tech event talking about investing in deep tech, and we'll bring together our folks in person and get them to learn about investing in deep tech. So we'll do sort of trend or like sector specific sessions on different aspects of the VC ecosystem, and it's great because we not only do in-person connections, we do virtual ones too. So they'll also get access to virtual meetups, virtual life-wide learning. The Careers Week is virtual, so we do ensure that people who are not in the UK, we're a UK entity, but we do have a lot of people coming in from all around the world. In fact, we had someone join from Singapore who was turning up to live sessions at like 3 a.m. in the morning for them. She was amazing. But, there's a lot of commitment to learning, which I think is really testament to the people we've got coming through the door.
Absolutely, that's amazing. And sort of my last main question before we go for the close. So, do you want to share any past success stories of people who have gone through the program and now kind of are doing well, maybe in the venture capital space? Yeah.
Yeah, we get asked this a lot, and it's sort of this, oh, what percentage of people have gone on to get a job in venture capital or and it's quite hard sometimes, especially so early on, to quantify those figures. However, every single fellowship we've run, someone has launched a fund not long afterwards, so that's been pretty cool. I definitely see I'm on all the WhatsApps of deal sharing and potential co-investments and connections. So if you think about the quality connections of that are going on there, and then we do see people going on to get jobs in venture capital, but also jobs in just the VC tech ecosystem. So they're really accelerating, and having that knowledge behind them about how venture capital works and powers the tech ecosystem is so imperative if you're going to be in this space. You've got to understand that, if you go and work in a startup, that founder has a journey in their mind. You're not aware of that. How can you work towards the same goal? And so, having some sort of education behind you really can empower you to move forward. So we have lots of success stories, but they're kind of more really about the community that's being built, celebrating those who go on to do these great things, like launching their first fund, converting a family office into a fund, and it's really wonderful to be able to share everyone's success together as a strong community.
Absolutely. That's amazing to learn. So, amazing description of what Newton does and for good reasons and required reasons. So, to close this out, can you tell our listeners if they're interested in the Newton program, how do they apply and how often do these programs open for applications and at what point? Right? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So Foundations is open all the time. So you can join, you got 12 weeks to complete it, and then we switch over as we make small iterations, but it's open to join at any time. So anyone who's interested, who just wants to train an intern, or like, you've got a new front of house in your team, or you just want to understand the structure of venture capital, that's a great place to put people. Our foundations and fellowship program next rounds will be at the end of this year, so October time, ready for starting in the new year, which is really cool, October, November. And we run them twice a year. So we actually just closed applications this month for the next round. So we're just receiving a lot of thanks so much. I'm so excited to join. Like emails coming in from people who just got on our last round of programs. But, please know that for fundamentals, you don't have to have any venture capital experience at all. We want diversity of thought in the room. We want people who are just excited about this space and want to learn. So please come along and have a look, because we love the community we're building here at Newton, and would love to have more voices in the room.
Absolutely. So is the free foundations program that's running all time, is that program a requirement to join your cohort based program? No.
No, not at all. But we do highly recommend people take the foundations program before joining in the fundamentals program, just to give people a good grounding and get back into the swing of learning. If you
Right.
haven't been learning for a while, all of
Yeah.
a sudden you're just like, oh, I've got a lot of information to take on. So it's a good standing block to go forward. But we often find people have taken the foundations program and then, oh, I really need to learn more about venture capital, and then apply. So yeah, it's a two-way street.
Awesome. And what about the in-person program? Is that run like once per year, and when are the applications open for that?
So our fellowship program just closed as well, but we're running them twice a year now as well. So if anyone is interested, I think applications will be opening again in October or November, but you can follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and our webpage as well.
That's great. And I'll try to put some of those links in the show notes. Been a great conversation, Eleanor. Can you tell our listeners where can they go and follow you? What are your own social handles, and a potential way that they can reach you if there are any questions?
Yeah, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn, and you can find, well, maybe you can share the links, but I'm also on Twitter as well, sharing what's going on at Newton. So yeah, love to speak to anyone who's interested about any of our programs.
Absolutely. I'll make sure to put all those links in the show notes so that listeners can reach there easily. Thanks so much for doing this, Eleanor. You're doing brilliant work, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure.